One Piece just hinted at Rox D Zebeck's devil fruit, and it's way more terrifying than anyone expected. Like, this isn't some random power-up or flashy ability. This could explain everything about how he escaped Mera Mera, why the world government erased him, and how he's possibly still alive. What's wild is, the clues have been hiding in plain sight, and Chapter 1154 might have just cracked it wide open. Whether it's teleportation, immortality, or literal darkness, this devil fruit might be freakier than even Blackbeard's. Most fans think they already know how dangerous Rox D Zebeck really was, the man who commanded monsters like Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom, and Shiki. But what if I told you there's a huge part of his power that's been completely overlooked, and it might be hiding in plain sight? Because One Piece chapter 1154 dropped something so subtle so quick that a lot of people just skipped right past it. But if you read it slowly, if you really take in what Oda was doing, it might be the biggest clue we've ever gotten about Rox's true abilities. In that chapter, Rox doesn't just kill an admiral, which, okay, that's already insane enough on its own. But what happens right after is what completely breaks the rules of what we've seen in One Piece so far. He vanishes, completely disappears into thin air in the middle of Reverie, no less, the most secure place in the world, surrounded by Marines, Gorosei, Cypher Paul, the works, and this guy just evaporates like he's made of mist? Nah, something's not adding up. That shouldn't be physically possible unless he had some kind of power. And knowing how Oda drops hints, this wasn't just a flashy moment. This was a red flag wrapped in a mystery box. And here's where it gets interesting. In One Piece, most of the real monsters, the absolute top tiers, tend to have devil fruits. Whitebeard had the Gura Gura no Mi, Big Mom had Soru Soru, Kaido had Uo Uo. Blackbeard's got two. The outliers like Shanks, Roger, or Garp are legendary because they don't have fruits. They're the exceptions that prove the rule. And if you think about it, Rox doesn't really feel like the type of guy to limit himself to just hockey and grit. This is a man who wanted to rule the world, who openly defied the celestial dragons, who literally recruited ticking time bombs just to create chaos. Doesn't it make sense that he'd have some kind of devil fruit to push him beyond mortal limits? But the thing that keeps gnawing at people is what fruit would even let him do that? Because disappearing without a trace in the middle of enemy territory, after murdering someone of admiral rank, without leaving behind any blood trail, any escape route, any sign of life, that's not just speed or hockey. That's not even Shanks level movement. That's borderline supernatural. Some fans have started to speculate that Rox might have had a devil fruit related to space, shadows, or even illusions, something that bends reality or perception. There's even buzz online that it could have been a prototype or inspiration for Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi. Like Rox might have had the original model, or maybe even a related mythical Zoan with demonic or yokai powers that let him phase between realms. But that's where the theories really start spiraling. It's been said over and over that the Ope Ope no Mi is one of the most broken devil fruits in the entire series. Not just because of its power in combat, but because of what it can do behind the scenes, away from the battlefield, in places where nobody's watching. And honestly, if any character in One Piece history ever matched that exact energy, it's Rox D Zebeck. Now, I know it sounds wild at first, Rox had Law's fruit, but the more you actually start piecing the clues together, the more this theory stops sounding crazy and starts sounding inevitable. Because One Piece Chapter 1154 doesn't just show us Rox destroying an admiral, which is already shaking up the power scale. It shows him doing something we haven't seen anyone else pull off at that level. He literally makes himself disappear out of Mera Mera without warning, without effort, and without a single trace. And the way Oda drew that panel, it's the exact same gesture Law makes every single time he uses Shambles. It's that quick hand sign, that sudden shift of presence, and fans who've watched Law for hundreds of episodes recognized it immediately. The resemblance isn't just visual, it's thematic. It's calculated movement, god-tier precision, and an exit so clean it almost feels surgical, which ironically is exactly what the Ope Ope no Mi is all about. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. The lore of the Ope Ope no Mi already tells us it once belonged to a legendary doctor before Trafalgar Law ever had it, and the exact identity of that user has never been confirmed. The timeline adds up, the mystery is intentional, and given Rox's mysterious disappearance from history, not just from God Valley, but from records, memories, and the lips of survivors, it actually makes a scary amount of sense that the user who had the Ope Ope no Mi before Law could have been him. Think about it. This fruit lets you swap positions in an instant, operate on your own body, heal mortal wounds, create protective barriers, and even potentially grant immortality at the cost of your life. But here's the thing. What if Rox didn't just use the fruit to cheat death? What if he never died at all? Because if Rox did have the Ope Ope no Mi, then surviving the God Valley incident suddenly stops being a miracle and starts being the logical outcome. That power could have easily let him fake his own death, teleport out of danger, switch bodies with someone else, or even alter his presence to the point that the world believed he was gone. And knowing how paranoid the world government is, maybe that's exactly why they tried to erase every single detail about him. But since Law has the fruit, it only means that the former users of the fruit is already dead or did not survive in the God Valley, so keep that in mind. Maybe it's not the Ope Ope no Mi after all, and if he's still alive, yeah, that's where things start to spiral. Now, while the Ope Ope no Mi might be the most convincing choice based on what we've seen so far, there's been a lot of buzz online about another possibility, one that's way more symbolic, way more poetic, and honestly, kind of sinister when you line it up with the rest of the One Piece legacy. Some fans believe that Rox D Zebeck could have been the original user of the Mera Mera no Mi, the exact same flame-based fruit that would eventually fall into the hands of Portgas D Ace. And that detail right there, with that twist of fate, Sawun, is exactly what makes this theory so interesting. Because imagine this for a second. The fruit of pure destruction, pure fire, pure domination, originally wielded by the man who wanted to burn the world down and rebuild it in his own image, somehow ending up in the hands of the son of his greatest rival, the one man who stopped him, Gall D. Roger. That kind of ironic symmetry? That's not just coincidence, that's Oda. That's narrative karma layered across generations. You've got Rox, the man who nearly shook the world government to its core, potentially wielding the Mera Mera no Mi in its most raw, unrefined form, using it not as a symbol of brotherhood or willpower like Ace would, but as a weapon of total annihilation. And then, decades later, that same exact fruit is passed down to the next generation, only to be claimed by the child of the man who stopped him. It's poetic, it's cruel, it's almost too perfect, especially when you look at what happened next. And now here's the kicker that takes this theory into overdrive. Now we know that Blackbeard is Rox's biological son, which a lot of fans are mind-blown. Then we've got this entire generational echo happening in the background. Think about it. Rox may have had the Mera Mera. It gets passed down to Roger's kid. Meanwhile, Rox's own son doesn't inherit that power. He goes after something even more terrifying. Whitebeard's devil fruit. It's like both sides of the old war are repeating themselves through the new generation, but with flipped outcomes, reversed roles, and way more chaos. And if that's not a red flag that something bigger is going on behind the curtain, I don't know what is. But we're still not done. Now, while the Ope Ope no Mi might be the most convincing choice based on what we've seen so far, there's been a lot of buzz online about another possibility, one that's way more symbolic, way more poetic, and honestly, kind of sinister when you line it up with the rest of the One Piece legacy. Some fans believe that Rox D Zebeck could have been the original user of the Mera Mera no Mi. See, we've been so focused on the idea of Rox as a brute, as this chaotic force who tried to rule the world through violence, that we might have missed the bigger picture entirely. What if Rox wasn't just trying to be king? What if he was trying to erase the very idea of royalty? Not just the celestial dragons, but the whole hierarchy, the entire structure of control that the world government built. Because when you really stop and look at how much of the current era is defined by silence, by things not being said, names not being mentioned, events not being explained, it starts to feel like someone didn't just lose, they were deliberately buried. Maybe Rox wasn't erased because he lost, maybe he was erased because he almost won. And if that's the case, then we're not looking at a typical villain arc. We're looking at the origin of a forgotten revolution. And that brings up something even more chilling. What if Rox didn't need to survive physically to still exist in the story? Because in a world where D carriers are constantly challenging the system, where the new generation is unknowingly following paths laid decades ago, and where chaos keeps erupting in the exact same pressure points across the world, what if all of this isn't random? What if the storm that's coming isn't just Luffy versus Imu or Blackbeard versus the Navy? What if this entire war is the result of a plan Rox put into motion before he ever disappeared? A legacy that never needed a body, just an idea, and a few people crazy enough to keep it alive. But here's where the tension really snaps. What if I told you the Revolutionary Army might not be as original as they think they are? Because yeah, Dragon built it, he's the leader, and their goal has always been clear: topple the celestial dragons, destroy the world government, and build something new in its place. But that goal, that fire, that exact same mission might have been born decades earlier, not in a revolutionary meeting, but in a pirate's dream. Think about it. What if everything the Revolutionary Army is fighting for started with Rox D Zebeck? And here's where it gets spicy. Dragon used to be a Marine. He was on the inside. What if he found something, a classified report, a hidden document, a mission log from God Valley that showed him the truth about what Rox was really trying to do? And instead of running from it, he picked up the torch. It sounds crazy, right? But Oda's been layering this subtext for years. Both Rox and Dragon declared war on the celestial dragons. Both targeted the world's deepest structures. Both refused to play by the rules of piracy or politics. And here's the kicker. Rox didn't just vanish from history, he was erased. Sengoku said it outright. The world government wiped Rox D. Zebeck's name from the history books, as if he never existed. But Dragon, his name wasn't erased. It was made into a warning. Unlike Dragon, who was turned into a symbol of fear. The world government wants the world to know his name because it sends a message. Defy us, and you become enemy number one. It's a different kind of threat, but no less dangerous. And that contrast might tell us everything about how close Dragon actually is to following in Rox's footsteps. Not just ideologically, but literally. They don't care how strong you are. They care about what you believe. And Rox might have believed something so dangerous, so disruptive, that the only way to stop him was to bury his entire existence. But if Dragon inherited that will, knowingly or not, in Seal, then we're not watching the rise of a new revolution. We're watching the return of the old one. And if that's true, the final war might not be about who wins. It might be about who finishes what Rox started.